And this is, I think, as the 10th anniversary is really an appropriate place where I can publicly say, after all those attacks and accusations about me and my past and my family, Mason, I forgive you. This is a great moment to look back. And I did oppose Amendment 64 based on the concerns. And again, you've got to get back to there was so little testing. And some pretty serious doctors thought that there was tremendous risk that the high concentration THC could destroy long-term memory of kids whose brains were rapidly growing, teenagers. There was a concern that the legalization would cause teenagers to think it wasn't such a big deal, and they'd start using it more, and they'd experiment more. And one of the great things that Colorado has is a health survey, Healthy Kids Colorado, where we go out. It's now up over 40,000 participants, but I go into the US Senate on a regular basis and say, we can prove that since we legalized marijuana, there has been no increase in teenage experimentation, no increase in consumption, no increase in driving while high. And I think the ability to go and say, as Governor Polis said, as Mason described, all the myriad benefits. And just so we're perfectly clear, I smoked pot when I was 16. Right? It wasn't like I was worried about it from my own personal point of view. It really was a question of a societal wave. If you're going to be in the forefront of something like that, you better be pretty darn sure. I feel pretty darn sure now that this is such a better, in terms of almost every measure, such a better societal decision than what I grew up in. And it's going to have huge impacts. And Mason described what we called the Amendment 64 Task Force. He didn't mention, but a young man named Andrew Friedman, who was the chief of staff for the lieutenant governor, very talented. You know, he looked like he was 18. He was actually 30 years old. But he'd gone to Harvard Law School. He knew how to think. He knew process. We'd worked on him on the campaign trail. He knew how to get everybody involved in making sure that we created policy that was going to work. Because there were a lot of people in this state that wanted it to fail. And if we didn't do a process by wherein everybody got a voice, we didn't dot every I, cross every T, we would have been ravaged at every turn. And I think making sure that we got all the stakeholders, not just the growers and the lawyers, the people that had natural self-interest, but we got religious groups involved, we got local politicians involved. We really built a broad consensus that we were going to make this work. The voters had legalized it, we were going to make this work, and we did. And I think that, again, as Governor Polis described, as Mason described, as Brian described, this model is something that's opened the door for all these other states. And I've personally gone and talked to either the General Assembly or the governors in half a dozen states of what about this and what about that? And literally there is no attack, no anxiety that we don't have a pretty good answer for. And that we are constantly trying to figure out what is the best system, how can we improve the system. And we're at a point now where I think it is time for the federal government to step up to the big boy table and make that move. And I think we're going to work very hard to get safe banking done in the lame duck. I think it's got a decent shot. It's going to be, there's some obstacles, but we're going to push that pretty hard. I think President Biden is absolutely sincere that this is how he goes about it. This is him opening the door and saying, all right, we're going to start moving down this process, this pathway, and we're going to move forward. And it's our intention, our office, we're going to introduce legislation in the next month that will create a similar, just like we had an Amendment 64 task force, we want to create national task force through legislation so that we pave the way and make sure that when that change occurs through the executive office of the president, that we're ready for it. And we've done that same stakeholder process. We know so much more now than we did back in 2013 when we started the Amendment 64 task force, that a lot of the discussions is going to be a much faster path and at a higher level of discussion. But it'll still be challenging because now, obviously, the self-interest and the different factions that are going to want to weigh in on this have a lot more at stake. But I have every confidence that just as we did here, that by bringing people together, we'll be able to get to the appropriate resolution and create a system that, based on your model, that so many of you in this room created, you'll be able to legalize marijuana, deschedule it, but let's just use it what it is, legalize marijuana in America. Thank you.